Taking your calls at 855-840-HUCK. That's 840-4825.
As somebody who has served in a southern state capital for quite some time, 10.5 years as a governor and 3 as a lieutenant governor, and seeing a very, very difficult situation for Republicans, it is very impressive to see what has happened in Alabama. Now, most of the southern states have shifted over from longtime hardcore Democrat to Republican over the past, let's say, 20 years. Started in South Carolina back when Carroll Campbell was governor there, and Republican viewpoint and Republican organization started drifting throughout the South. The Carolinas, Georgia, there would be pockets of it in even places like Alabama, Mississippi, and so on. But as far as control of the legislature, you might get a Republican governor, but the legislature was, for the most part, for a long time in a lot of these state capitals, still very, very much dominated by Democrats. And that has very rapidly changed. When I first became governor, there were 89 out of 100 of the members of the House who were Democrats, and 31 out of 35 senators who were Democrats. Now, that has changed over time, but one state that has seen a dramatic turn is the state of Alabama. Mike Hubbard is the Speaker of the House, and he has chronicled not just the what, but the how. How did it happen? In a new book called Storming the State House, the campaign that liberated Alabama from 136 years of Democrat rule. And Mike Hubbard joins me now here on the Mike Huckabee Show. Mike, it's great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Governor. I appreciate you having me on.
So you chronicle what took place, and it really is a pretty remarkable story, because when you guys started and mapped out, said, we'd like for Republicans to be in the majority, what was the number breakdown that you had in the House and the Senate in Alabama?
Well, it goes back to 1998, and our mutual friend, Governor Bob Riley, is the person who inspired me to get involved in public service. And when I ran and was elected in 98, there were 34 Republicans out of 105 in the House of Representatives. And then when Congressman Riley ran for governor and was elected, we had 38 and then got up to 42 during his time. And as you know, he was an outstanding governor, and I served as his floor leader and the minority leader. But every legislative proposal that he would send across the street was just dead on arrival. And it really came about when Governor Riley called me into his office after his second inaugural and says, Mike, I have something I want you to do for me. And I said, Governor, I'll do anything you want me to do. My youngest son's named Riley, so that tells you how much I think of him. And he said, I want you to run for party chairman. And I remember I said, well, Governor, I can't think of anything I want to do less than be party chairman. I can't do it. My wife will divorce me. I just don't have time. I can serve you better by being your floor leader. I'll help you find somebody to run. But I walked out of his office 10 minutes later running for party chairman. He is very persuasive. But I'm thankful that he did, because we really did put together a plan to take over the legislature. And he really didn't benefit from it because he was term limited out. But he understood, after serving 2 terms as governor, that you really could not change state government unless you control the legislature. The teachers union in Alabama has been historically very, very powerful, and they figured that out 40 years ago, that they didn't put any resources into gubernatorial races or judicial races. It was all about the legislature, and it really did take a concerted effort that I talk about in the book in order to change that.
Mike Hubbard is my guest. He is Speaker of the House in Alabama. His book is Storming the State House. It's all about a Republican takeover in a southern state. And Mike, your state was very much like Arkansas has been, dominated by longtime, not only Democrats, but I would call them also Dixiecrats,
right,
who are Democrats, but nothing like Nancy Pelosi Democrat or Harry Reid Democrat or Barack Obama Democrat. Largely conservative and traditional in values, just more populist maybe with economic issues. But let me ask you, how much has this been the result of the National Democratic Party abandoning the people who are in the Democratic Party in states like Alabama and other parts of the South with liberal viewpoints on both fiscal and social issues that people in places like Alabama just can't handle?
Well, it played a role, obviously, a big role, and we had to take advantage of that. One of the big issues that we found, and part of the story that I tell in the book is how we put together a plan. We raised the money, and we had a concerted effort. We recruited good quality candidates to run. But one of the reasons the Democrats were able to stay in control for so long is obviously manipulating the district lines through redistricting. Yeah. But also we allowed them to act one way in Montgomery and another way back home. Sure, they were not liberals like a Nancy Pelosi or a Tom Daschle or whoever, but we allowed them to vote with the teachers union and with the same old crowd that had controlled Montgomery, and we didn't call them out on it. And that's where we kind of had to break the mold of, I guess there was a gentleman's agreement that we didn't go after incumbents. We could only go after in open seats, and we decided when I became chairman that was those days were over. We were going to do whatever it took to try to win. But there's no doubt that played a big role in it. And one of the things we found in our polling, and I talk about this in the book, is that trying to call the Democrats liberals in Alabama didn't work because nobody bought that they were liberals. Mm-hmm. What we had to do was just brand them as Democrats and being on the same team as Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, the other true liberals in Montgomery, and say, you're known by the company you keep. And so it all played a part, but there's no doubt that the change in the National Democrat Party played a huge difference. And as you know, in the South for the longest amount of time, there were no Republicans. I mean, it was.
Tell me about it.
The Republicans were the bad guys.
Tell me about it.
And my parents were Democrats growing up in Georgia. There were no Republicans, and slowly over time, the more conservative Democrats became Republicans, and now it's we have seen a true transformation. And as you mentioned at the outset, we're one of the final states in the South to make the switch. Before us was South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and now thankfully Mississippi has finally flipped over to Republican control.
Let's talk a minute with Mike Hubbard, Speaker of the House in Alabama. His book is Storming the State House. It's about how the campaign that liberated Alabama from 136 years of Democrat rule. But let's talk about the impact, because I don't think a lot of people understand that having a legislative majority is a big deal.
Yes, sir.
And you understand it, I understand it, but I'm not sure a lot of our listeners can understand. It's kind of like, well, okay, so what's the big deal? Whether you're a majority, a minority, you got your viewpoint out there. Explain to our listeners why having a Republican majority in a state like Alabama completely transforms the landscape of state government.
Well, as you know, the majority party in the legislature is the one that controls the agenda, controls which bills are considered all the way through the committee process and what's being considered on the floor. When we were in the minority, the only thing we could hope for is to stand together, pick up a couple of Democrats to vote with us, and kill bad things. We could not propose anything and get it passed. And as I said earlier, when Governor Riley would send over his conservative legislative agenda, I mean, it was thrown immediately into the wastebasket. Now that we're in the majority, we set the agenda. As the Speaker of the House, I pick all of the members of all committees, pick all of the chairmen. And so when we set an agenda, we can actually pass it. And we've only been in the majority for 2 years, Governor, and already we have changed the entire mindset and landscape of Montgomery. We have passed tenure reform, which would have been an absolute impossibility to even consider it while the Democrats were in charge. We passed budgeting reform, ethics reform, and tort reform. We passed last year, in our first year in the majority, we passed a package of pro-business, anti-trial lawyer tort reform that needed to be done for years, but we simply could not get them passed. And with the power of the union, they were the ones that set the agenda, and we have finally been able to pass legislation related to education that's actually designed to educate kids instead of doing what's best for the union.
Having a Republican governor, as you do with Governor Bentley now and Governor Riley before, also has the effect of helping to change the bureaucracy by appointing people to head agencies who have a point of view that's in concert with the legislative viewpoint. That's something, again, most people don't understand, that it takes time. This is not a bass boat. This is, a battleship, right. And you don't turn it quickly. You've got to project ahead, and then you have to outlive some people. You've got to live past some folks' retirement. in order to root out within the bureaucracy of a state government all of the really obstacles to institutional change. How long will it take long term for your state, Alabama, to see what I would call a total transformation all the way into the bureaucracies?
Well, Governor, I think it's probably a decade, but we've already seen some changes really faster than I anticipated. When we started changing the way Montgomery operates, there were a lot of people in the bureaucracy who just said, I'm not going to be a part of this. I've been doing it one way for too long, and they're retiring and getting out of state government. We've actually passed some changes dealing with the retirement benefits and encouraged people to go ahead and retire, and they have. But you're right. It is a battleship, and in state governments, just like the federal government, you have so many people in state government that actually make things work. You can't just turn it on a dime and say we're going to change this and make everything change the way we want it. But we have been able, by controlling the executive branch and the legislative branch, to go ahead and put some things in place that really is moving it much, much faster than anyone anticipated. And I can tell you it is a lot more fun being in a position to do positive things than just to stop bad things. And right now we're already working on our legislative agenda for next session. And, before we would put our agenda together just really to get a press release and to say, here's what we're for, knowing that it was dead. And it's awful nice to be able to have one knowing that we can actually put it into place, pass them, and that we have a governor who will sign it into law.
Well, Mike Hubbard, thank you. It's a delight to hear about the transformation of your state.
And, thank you very much. And hopefully Arkansas is going to make the switch next.
I think this year is going to turn. Last year, let me say in the 2010 elections, the state got really close to parity in the legislature, and it very well could be that both the Senate and the House could switch to Republican, and I attribute a lot of that to Barack Obama. I've told our party chairman in Arkansas, I said, frankly, you ought to host a big banquet, and you ought to honor Barack Obama. It would make a national news to say the Republican Party of Arkansas is having a banquet in honor of President Obama, and to thank him for all he has done to make Arkansas a two-party state for the first time since Reconstruction, because nobody has singularly done more to bring people. And by the way, for anybody who thinks it has not one thing to do with race, it is about the policies of this president that have just been so doggone unpopular that no Democrat in the state wants to get near it.
Absolutely.
And so I think, there's this perception that, these southern states don't like Barack Obama because of his race. I've not heard that. I'm sure there are some people who think that way, but Mike, that has not been what has driven people away from the old Democratic Party of their fathers and their grandfathers.
Oh,
anyway, good luck on the book, Storming the State House. Speaker Mike Hubbard from Alabama. Delight to have you here today.
Thank you, Governor.